Hello, my name is Peter. I have a wife and 2 children, and I work in an ironworking factory in Manchester. The other day after work, I happened to overhear a young student giving an impassioned speech in a public square about Marx and Engels and their Communist Manifesto. In it, he outlined how the entire course of human development and progress has led to the current state of affairs that I and other workers like myself now find ourselves in. A state of constant uncertainty where we sell our labor to factory owners who live grandly while we struggle to survive on meager wages. His words resonated deeply with me, and though I still have my reservations, I am now considering joining my local Communist Party, or at least learning more about them. I work hard for the wages I earn in order to support my family, but my wages do not cover our cost. My wife works when she can, and as soon as my son turns 8, he will begin working as well if there is any work to be had. This was not always the case. Prior to working in the factory, I made cast iron cooking utensils in my shop. However, after the opening of an ironworking factory in the city that was able to outproduce me and undercut my prices, I was forced to close my shop. My family needed money. Thus, I was forced to take a job in the same factory that forced me out of business. Instead of making a variety of utensils, however, I am now only in charge of operating a machine that stamps out handles for use in pots and pans. In a way, my story is that of the growth of the proletariat the student was talking about. He mentioned how skilled laborers like myself were being replaced by machines too expensive for anyone but the wealthy bourgeoisie to own. Once workers like myself are separated from the means of production, we are left to sell our labor. He also mentioned how the division of labor was reducing the value of the worker, and therefore how this resulted in our low wages. I have seen this firsthand. Making the utensils like I do in my shop required time, effort, and a great deal of skill. My new job is so simple that a child could do it. Indeed, they often do. And therefore, I am worth very little to the factory owner, and I am easily replaceable. This puts the factory owner in an easy position to exploit me. Since he desires the maximum amount of my labor for the minimum cost, I work long hours in unsafe conditions, and as I mentioned before, my pay is barely enough to provide for my family. I would like to work less. I would like to be paid more. But if I say something, or if I organize with my coworkers to try to bargain with management, he will undoubtedly fire us all. It is an adversarial relationship, and I constantly feel as if I am in conflict with the owner. Furthermore, since I do not make enough money to support to vote, my coworkers and I have no means of redress through the political system. We feel powerless. The communist student, however, promised a much different world. In it, he spoke of the abolition of private property. I rent my apartment, I own no land, and my possessions are meager. I have little to lose if private property is abolished. I have everything to gain, however, through the collective ownership of capital, through the communist idea of social property. Furthermore, he spoke of democracy, where I would have my say in government. This would change the government from being an agent of the bourgeois factory owners who use it to exploit us, to being the agents of the working men like me. While the student's speech made a lot of sense, some of it seemed too good to be true. For instance, he assumed that the conversion of private property to social property and the centralized planning of an economy free from competition would result in greater production. Perhaps I do not completely understand his plan, but in my experiences in my shop, competition drove me to innovate more efficient techniques in producing my utensils and offer lower prices. Also, my production was based on demand for my products, so I had very little waste. It seems like it would be very difficult to replicate this sort of efficiency with such a large scale. He talked of national, even international scales of government. It seems very unlikely that the state would be able to determine the needs of the people exactly, or even that the state, which would be governed by the democracy, would be able to come to an agreement on the uniform sets of needs for the people. Another serious concern I had while listening to the student was the question of the limitations on the state. The problem with modern capitalist society is that it allows the bourgeoisie to subjugate the labor of the proletariat. In the communist model, classes are destroyed, as all members of society form one common working class. However, in this model, the state, which now controls the capital, has the ability to subjugate the labor of the working class. What policies will be put in place to limit the power of the state in this regard? Marx and Engels might assert that since the state is controlled by the people via democracy, it will not be a problem since the incentives of the state and the incentives of the workers are perfectly aligned. I do not know if I agree with this, since it supposes a level of homogeneity of worker interests that just may not be reasonable. This risk could also be mitigated by reducing specialization of labor, but once again, this draws into question the ability of the state to be more productive than the current market economy. Despite the troubles I face today, many consumer product goods have become more accessible to all members of society, myself included, due to the falling costs and increasing productivity. Productivity that has occurred due to specialization and industrialization. Even with these concerns, however, the promises made by the student the scientific nature of the speech, and the predictive power that the manifesto seemed to have, as evidenced by the many revolutions this past year that occurred across continental Europe, make communism a compelling and attractive ideology to a worker like me, and I would definitely want to learn more about it.